Good afternoon and welcome to the Angry Bulletin once again from Shetland in the United Kingdom, just trying to help everybody relax in the aftermath of this horrible event that took place in the United States, the first assassination attempt against a former or sitting president in over 4 decades. And at this very moment, my understanding is there's one person dead and a couple more fighting for their lives in the hospital. Our thoughts go out to them, of course. And also, I'd like to remind you that I, as always, do not embrace conspiracy theories, whether it be UFOs or politics. If this was an inside job by the Biden administration, Trump should definitely have been dead, because after this, I think he's guaranteed to win the election, which would be an incredibly stupid thing to do if that was Biden. On the other side of the equation, I have seen left-wing friends of mine argue that this was an inside job by the Trump administration, again trying to give himself a boost in the polls with an assassination attempt. If that's the case, that was insane, because the bullet clipped his ear and was centimeters away from ending his life. So before we all start turning on one another in the midst of this tragedy, might be a good time to try to come together as a nation. Just my opinion. Let's get on to the topic at hand. In the world of popular astronomy, there are few characters as revered as Carl Sagan, a man who popularized astronomy for all of us, all the way back to the early 1980s with the Cosmos series, something that I was obsessed with the first time I saw it. But what a lot of astronomers aren't willing to admit is the fact that Carl Sagan was also really excited about looking for extraterrestrial life. And in the 1980s, Carl Sagan headed up a project that searched for narrow-band, high-intensity radio signals from extraterrestrial sources. And after those 5 years, they actually found 11 different candidates, 8 of which seem to originate from our own galaxy, that are very similar to the famous WOW signal that happened back in 1977. What were these signals? Do we know anything more about them? And why does no one talk about this discovery? All of this and more coming at you on The Angry Astronaut right now. A month from now, extraterrestrial enthusiasts will celebrate the discovery of the WOW signal, the 47th anniversary of this amazing event, where a narrowband, extremely powerful signal that up to this point has defied all natural explanation or any artificial explanation, at least human artificial explanation, was detected by Ohio State University's Big Ear Radio telescope. This was exactly what SETI and other researchers in the extraterrestrial signal field were trying to find. A signal that not only was powerful, not only was narrowband, but also coincided with a frequency that coincides with the radio signals given off by molecular hydrogen. Since hydrogen is the most common element in the universe by far, it is largely thought that this frequency would be sort of a universal identifier, a universal frequency that anybody might use to get the attention of another civilization. Now, some continue to claim up to this day that it was actually a group of comets passing through the solar system, and the hydrogen associated with the water vapor in these comets that actually created the signal. This was debunked almost 50 years ago, and yet it continues to float around in the media. The most recent posting I saw was in 2017. It is impossible for this to have happened. Comets do not generate narrowband radio signals, and even if they did, well, it's something that we would pick up on a very regular basis, and we just don't. Narrowband radio signals do not originate from natural objects most of the time. Even the really powerful fast radio bursts that we pick up are broadband transmissions, not narrowband. So that being the case, the WOW signal remains one of the most compelling signals that we have ever received to indicate the possible presence of extraterrestrial civilizations. But what a lot of people don't realize, as I suggested before, is that Carl Sagan implemented a very exhaustive search for other signals like the WOW signal in the 1980s through a project called META. Now, instead of trying to explain META for you in my own clumsy way, I'm going to go ahead and quote extensively from Carl Sagan's Pale Blue Dot book. And by the way, I strongly recommend that you download this thing. It is an absolutely fascinating read. Quote, META is an acronym for Mega Channel Extraterrestrial Assay. Each channel, each station we tune to has an exceptionally narrow frequency range. There are no known processes out amongst the stars and galaxies that can generate such sharp radio lines. If we pick up anything falling into so narrow a channel, it must, we think, be a token of intelligence and technology. What's more, the Earth turns, which means that any distant radio source will have a sizable apparent motion, like the rising and setting of the stars. Just as the steady tone of a car's horn dips as it drives by, so any authentic extraterrestrial radio source will exhibit a steady drift in frequency due to the Earth's rotation. In contrast, any source of radio interference at the Earth's surface will be rotating at the same speed as our receiver. META's listening frequencies are continuously changed to compensate for the Earth's rotation so that any narrowband signals from the sky will always appear in a single channel, but any radio interference down here on Earth will give itself away by racing through adjacent channels. The META radio telescope at Harvard, Massachusetts is 26 meters in diameter, and each day, as the Earth rotates the telescope beneath the sky, a swath of stars the size of the full moon is swept out and examined. Next day, it's an adjacent swath. Over a year, all of the northern sky and part of the southern is observed. An identical system, which was sponsored by the Planetary Society, actually the entire program was sponsored by the Planetary Society, which incidentally, Carl Sagan was the president in those days, is in operation, or was in operation, just outside of Buenos Aires, Argentina, to examine the southern sky. So the two metasystems together have been exploring the entire sky. The radio telescope, gravitationally glued to the spinning Earth, looks at any given star for about 2 minutes. Then it's on to the next. Now, the system is capable of scanning 8.4 million channels, and it's at this point that Carl Sagan explains why the hydrogen line is so important. 8.4 million channels sounds like a lot, but remember, each channel is very narrow. All of them together constitute only a few parts in 100,000 of the available radio spectrum. So we have to park our 8.4 million channels somewhere in the radio spectrum for each year of observation, near some frequency that an alien civilization knowing nothing about us might nevertheless conclude that we're listening to. Hydrogen is by far the most abundant kind of atom in the universe. It's distributed in clouds and diffuse gas throughout interstellar space. When it acquires energy, it releases some of it by giving off radio waves at a precise frequency of 1420.405.751.768 megahertz. Radio astronomers anywhere in the galaxy will be studying the universe at 1420 megahertz and can anticipate that other radio astronomers, no matter how different they may look, will do the same. It's as if someone told you that there's only one station in your home radio set's frequency band, that no one knows the frequency. And one other thing, your set's frequency dial, with its thin marker you adjust by turning a knob. Yes, this is probably something very unfamiliar with the younger of you in my viewing audience, but in any event, this dial happens to reach from Earth to the moon. Huge number of frequencies. To search systematically through this vast radio spectrum, patiently turning the knob is going to be very time consuming. Your problem is to set the dial correctly from the beginning, to choose the right frequency. If you can correctly guess what frequencies the extraterrestrials are broadcasting to us on, these magic frequencies, and you can save yourself much time and trouble. You can see how challenging this process is, and why we've had so little luck in detecting much much of anything, especially if you consider how little effort we put into it. There haven't been very many meta projects in the history of our civilization. Now, of course, there's a background level of radio noise from the Earth, radio and television stations, aircraft, portable telephones, or maybe cellular telephones, something that didn't exist when this was written, nearby and more distant spacecraft. Also, as with all radio receivers, the longer you wait, the more likely it is that there'll be some random fluctuations in the electronics so strong that it generates a spurious signal. So we ignore anything that isn't much louder than the background. Any strong, narrowband signal that remains in a single channel we take very seriously. As it logs in the data, Meta automatically tells the human operators to pay attention to certain signals. Over 5 years, this system made some 60 trillion observations at various frequencies while examining the entire accessible sky. A few dozen signals survived the culling. And these were subjected to further scrutiny, and almost all of them were rejected. For example, because an error was found by fault detection microprocessors that examine the signal detection microprocessors. What's left, the strongest candidate signals, after 3 surveys of the sky, are 11 events. They satisfy all but one of our criteria for a genuine alien signal. But the one failed criterion is supremely important: verifiability. We've never been able to find any of them again. We look back at that part of the sky 3 minutes later and there's nothing there. We look again the following day, nothing. Examine it a year later or 7 years later, and there's still nothing. It seems unlikely that every signal we get from alien civilizations would turn itself off a couple of minutes after we begin listening and never repeat. How would they know that we're paying attention? But just possibly, this is the effect of twinkling. Stars twinkle because parcels of turbulent air are moving across the line of sight between the star and us. Sometimes these air parcels act as a lens and cause light rays from a given star to converge a little, making it momentarily brighter. Similarly, astronomical radio sources may also twinkle, owing to clouds of electrically charged or ionized gas in the great near vacuum between the stars. We observe this routinely with pulsars. Imagine a radio signal that's a little below the strength that we could otherwise detect on Earth. Occasionally, the signal will, by chance, be temporarily focused, amplified, and brought within the detectability range of our radio telescopes. The interesting thing is, in the lifetimes of such brightening, predicted from the physics of the interstellar gas, are a few minutes, and the chances of reacquiring the signal is small. We should really be pointing steadily at these coordinates in the sky, watching them for months. Despite the fact that none of these signals repeats, there's an additional fact about them that, every time I think about it, sends a chill down my spine. 8 of the 11 best candidate signals lie in or near the plane of the Milky Way galaxy. The 5 strongest are in the constellations Cassiopeia, Monoceros, Hydra, and 2 in Sagittarius, in the approximate direction of the center of the galaxy. The Milky Way is a flat, wheel-like collection of gas and dust and stars. Its flatness is why we see it as a band of diffuse light across the night sky. That's where almost all the stars in our galaxy are. If our candidate signals really were radio interference from Earth or some undetected glitch in the detection electronics, we shouldn't see them, preferentially when we're pointing at the Milky Way. The probability that this correlation with the galactic plane is due merely to chance is less than 0.5%. Imagine a wall-sized map of the sky, ranging from the North Star at the top of the fainter stars toward which the Earth's South Pole points at the bottom. Snaking across the wall map are the irregular boundary of the Milky Way. Now suppose that you were blindfolded and asked to throw 5 darts at random at the map. with much of the southern sky inaccessible from Massachusetts declared off limits. You'd have to throw the set of 5 darts more than 200 times before, by accident, you got them to fall as closely within the precincts of the Milky Way as the 5 strongest meta-signals did. Without repeatable signals, though, there's no way we can conclude that we've actually found extraterrestrial intelligence. Carl Sagan then goes on to speculate, much in the same way that Dr. Avi Loeb does, as to what the ramifications might be if these signals are indeed artificial. Quote, "Let's permit ourselves, though, a moment of extravagant speculation. Let's imagine that all of our surviving events are in fact due to radio beacons of other civilizations. Then we can estimate, from the little time we've spent watching each piece of sky, how many such transmitters there are in the entire Milky Way. The answer is something approaching 1 million. If randomly strewn through space, the nearest of them would be a few hundred light years away. Too far for them to have picked up our own TV or radar signals yet. They would not know for another few centuries that a technical civilization has emerged on Earth. The galaxy would be pulsing with life and intelligence, but unless they're busily exploring huge numbers of obscure star systems, wholly oblivious of what is happening down here lately. A few centuries from now, after they do hear from us, things might get very interesting, and fortunately, we'll have many generations to prepare. And by the way, in a paper entitled 5 Years of Meta, Sagan goes on to point out that if even one of these events seen by Meta is due to an extraterrestrial transmitter, then the corresponding figure becomes 50,000 detectable transmitters. 50,000 technical civilizations, or at least 50,000 transmitters possessed by perhaps interstellar civilizations, and just within our own galaxy, assuming that only one of these signals has an artificial origin. So what happened to these discoveries? Were they ever really followed up on? Well, Sagan and his associates gave NASA scientists the coordinates of these enigmatic events. Perhaps they would be able to confirm and clarify our results. The NASA SETI program was also developing new technology, stimulating ideas, and exciting school children. In the eyes of many, it was well worth the $10 million a year, $10 million being spent on it. But almost exactly a year after authorizing it, Congress pulled the plug on NASA's SETI program. It cost too much, they said. However, the post-Cold War U.S. defense budget, at least at the time of this writing, is some 30,000 times larger, and it's actually much bigger than that these days. The chief argument of the principal opponent of the NASA SETI program, Senator Richard Bryan of Nevada, was this: so far, the NASA SETI program has found nothing. In fact, all the decades of SETI research have found no confirmable signs of extraterrestrial life. Okay, maybe, assuming, of course, that extraterrestrial civilizations are always going to be in the habit of repeating their signals, but other than that, actually, something has been found, but nothing really that the majority of scientists are willing to confirm. So let's go on. Even with the current NASA version of SETI, I do not think that many of its scientists would be willing to guarantee that we are likely to see any tangible results of the foreseeable future. Scientific research rarely, if ever, offers guarantees of success, and I understand that, and the full benefits of such research are often unknown until very late in the process, and I accept that as well. In the case of SETI, however, the chances of success are so remote and the likely benefits of the program are so limited that there is little justification for the $12 million taxpayer dollars to be expended on this program. And that was that. And granted, other programs have pushed forward in the years that have elapsed since that time to now, and some of them have still come up with signals. There was one in 2018 from a sun-like star that still is being debated as to whether or not it was a genuine narrowband signal like all the others, but still, it is very difficult to confirm any of this without a lot of observation time being focused on every point in space where something was detected, and so far, nobody has invested the money or the effort to make any of that happen. And that's why we haven't detected extraterrestrial signals, not because there isn't anything there, we're simply not looking hard enough, and we never really have. So Carl Sagan concludes this particular chapter of this amazing book like this. Would I like to believe that with Meta we've detected transmissions from other civilizations out there in the dark, sprinkled through the vast Milky Way galaxy? You bet. After decades of wondering and studying this problem, of course I would. To me, such a discovery would be thrilling. It would change everything. We would be hearing from other beings, independently evolved over billions of years, viewing the universe perhaps very differently, perhaps much smarter, certainly not human. How much do they know that we don't? And for me, no signals. No one calling out to us is a depressing prospect. Complete silence, said Jean-Jacques Rousseau, is a different context. It induces melancholy. It is an image of death. But I am with Henry David Thoreau. Why should I feel lonely? Is not our planet in the Milky Way? And since I was very young, I've believed, as Carl Sagan has, that the Milky Way galaxy is brimming over with life and intelligent civilizations. We haven't found solid, confirmable evidence of their existence, but I believe they're there. And if we look hard enough, which we haven't really begun to do yet, I think we'll find them, if we really want to. Thank you very much for watching this celebration of 35 million views on this channel. And by the way, I have several more videos coming again to celebrate this event because it's just an incredible milestone that we've hit. I didn't celebrate 30 million views, so I want to make sure we do 35 million. I'm going to be covering a number of topics, not just extraterrestrial stuff. I'll be doing space flight, space science, etc. So please stay tuned. Again, thank you very much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, check the description for various ways to support this content and also to gain access to my new Patreon channel where we're releasing new videos every week or two and very interesting topics there as well. And as always, stay angry about space.